cough, I gotta leave quickly.
You could cough. I mean,
No,
just,
you don't want me to cough.
well, I don't want you to feel bad. Good evening. Is it evening really? What is it? Afternoon. It's that space in between the two. I'm Robert, and I'm going to play some classical piano for you. Maybe a little gospel at the end, if we want. And although I was just telling Harry here that I'm actually from New Jersey, but I'll talk about that a little more later. To start, I want to do an improvisation. It's something fun I like to do now, because improvisation is what they did in the past in classical music, and then somewhere in the 20th century stopped. I think it's a fun tradition. So I think last time I asked you to give me like 3 or 4 notes, and we did something. I made it. How about today we do something a little more on the funny side? At least that's the hope. And I want to play some very familiar melody, like something everybody knows, and of course something I know, and play it in the style of a composer. Like we're going to parody a composer, but maybe not Chopin or Mozart, just because they're great, but it's just, I've heard it too many times. So, okay, we need to pick our tune. What's a famous melody, like something everybody knows, a folk song or something? Okay, Mary, very good. So, okay, but what's funny is if we do it, whose style should we do it? It should be something, Bach is, we could do Bach, but Bach is really hard to do. Mozart, how about any others? I just want to, Dvorak. Did you say something? Chopin, we could do Chopin.
Stravinsky.
I like, that's fun. Okay, so how about this? How about a little Chopin and a little Stravinsky? Is that okay? Next time I'll honor everyone's request. Because Stravinsky will be funny, I think. Because Mary Had a Little Lamb, but in Stravinsky style? I mean, that's going to be weird, and I like it. Okay, so Mary Had a Little Lamb starting first as Chopin. So let's do Stravinsky, but I forgot to ask, do we want Rite of Spring, early period Stravinsky, middle period Stravinsky, neoclassical, or do we want the 12-tone late Stravinsky? Maybe you want to do more like the Rite of Spring, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's, okay, yeah, like Petrushka, okay, right. Well, Petrushka would be like... had to be strained, right? So, rhythmic. Stravinsky's very rhythmic. All right, now on a completely different note, I'm going to play, no pun intended, I'm going to do the second movement of Beethoven's Violin Concerto, arranged for piano by Beethoven himself. He did. I think last time I did the first movement of this, which is very long. It was like 25 minutes long. That's a whole car ride length. The second movement is a bit shorter, and it's the slow movement. So some history of this piece, and also why it also exists as a piano piece. It's interesting. Beethoven wrote it in 1806, and the first performance did not go well. Let's put it that way. Most of the audience fell asleep. I hope you won't, but the piece has got a new life later, but I'll explain it. The violinist at the time, Franz Clement, noticed that people were bored, so he turned his violin upside down and improvised a fiddle tune, like a folk song, to wake people up. Something fun and silly, maybe like the Stravinsky parody I just did, I don't know, but probably better. And continued with the piece. So Beethoven was upset. He saw this reaction. He wasn't so happy. Probably was like that because the piece is very meditative for Beethoven. It's very pastoral and calm. And actually, it's later that people like Mendelssohn, they sort of resurrected this piece. Joachim, the violinist, Hungarian violinist, also, because they understood why this music was so introspective. It's because Beethoven, at the time he wrote it, was coming to terms with the fact that he was going deaf. And it's a very philosophical piece, I think, because he's accepting that. Imagine, for anybody, but especially a musician like Beethoven, losing your hearing, it's just unthinkable. And so it adds a whole layer to this concerto, to this piece. But anyway, Beethoven was unhappy with the reaction, and with the urging of his friend Clementi, another wonderful composer, Muzio Clementi, I love his music very much, he arranged it for piano. And that version it's not done too much, although Barenboim played it and some others, but it's great for me because, I have my violin obsession, which I keep talking about, which in short is I'm obsessed with the violin and the great recordings of people like Heifetz and Milstein and Ivry Gitlis, you name it, I love them, but I'm too lazy to learn violin. It's too much trouble to switch instruments. So here's an example of a piece of music that Beethoven himself adapts it for piano. What I've done my own arrangement to add the orchestra part because it's for soloist plus orchestra. So anyway, this is let me make sure this thing is, okay, one time this thing wasn't on the whole time. All right. Okay, so second movement of the Beethoven Violin Concerto in its piano version. very peaceful and very calm. Even Beethoven could be like that. Yeah. So now I'm going to play some shorter pieces, some of which I've done here in the past, some not. I have some things since last time that are new, but I always beat myself up a little bit. I want to learn more new things than I think this brain is able to. So now I'm going to play, again, these are all violin, related pieces. This is Dvorak. It's songs my mother taught me by Dvorak, arranged by Russian composer Eduard Schutt. The violin version was done by Fritz Kreisler, who has a glorious recording of it. Beautiful, beautiful playing. More on Fritz Kreisler later. I'm going to play a short piece by him as well. Yeah, Dvorak was Czech, and this is from his gypsy songs, because gypsy and klezmer music are the two major folk musics, and there's a lot of overlap in those two types of music from Eastern and Central Europe. So if I were to sing it in Czech, it's originally for voice, I mentioned. The text is, I recall songs my mother taught to me, and now I teach them to my children. It's a very beautiful text. So here it is. Another short piece. These are all kind of like salon pieces, possibly you could say. This is Guitar by Moskowski. He was a Polish composer in the early 20th century, late 19th century, and not so popular today as he was back then. Although, well, there were a lot of pianists, like for example, Vladimir Horowitz loved to play Moskowski's music. And I have a theory about this. I think Moszkowski, a lot of his music, like this piece, is sort of bubbly and, well, happy. And I think that there's a trend in classical music now that if a piece of music is not, well, downright miserable, it's not worth playing. So, but, sometimes it's okay to smile and laugh. So, this piece is, of course, it's emulating a flamenco guitar from Spain. And Moszkowski's friend, Pablo de Sarasate, Spanish violinist, he noticed that this piece had this wonderful Spanish flair to it, and he arranged it for violin. And that's normally the version that's done. But as I said, I was too lazy to learn violin, so I'm playing the original Moszkowski guitar. Yeah, you'll hear that, it has that like a strummed guitar effect to it. So. Just jumping around with styles a little bit. Last time I played this very long first movement of Beethoven. What's nice about short pieces is you can have little samplers like Spanish tapas. Speaking of which, Spanish theme. And the next piece also has a Spanish theme. Maybe I'm hungry, I don't know. Maybe I should get tapas today. This is Ravel's, Maurice Ravel's Pièce en forme de habanera, piece in the style of a habanera. Habanera is originally, it's a pepper, right? Isn't there a pepper habanera? But it's a dance from Cuba, originally. And Cuban music is this great blend of the music of Spain and the music of West Africa. And the habanera dance from Havana, of course, it has this distinct rhythm. Bum, 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 bum. And if you like opera, Bizet's Carmen, there's a famous habanera there. Da da dee da 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 dum da 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 da. Right. So this dance, I think it was sort of all the rage in Europe at the turn of the last century. But this is Maurice Ravel's take on it. I was reading about how controversial not only Debussy but particularly Ravel were in their time, which I found really fascinating because we look at those composers, we think of them as impressionists, like the painters, right? We take their music as just part of the repertoire. But in the early days, the people like Saint-Saëns and Fauré, both of whom I love very much, but they absolutely they didn't like this music, especially Saint-Saëns. Fauré was one of Ravel's teachers, and Ravel wrote his F major string quartet as a gift for Fauré. You know what Fauré wrote to him in a letter? He said, clearly this piece is a complete disaster. Very encouraging words. Ravel was, I was imitating Stravinsky earlier. They were buddies. And while Ravel is a little more moody and dreamy sounding than Stravinsky, perhaps, they're not too far apart. You hear harmonies like this in this piece. That could be out of Stravinsky, out of Petrushka or something, or later. But Ravel, he's this interesting mix, you could say, of Debussy's watery, impressionistic type music. And also, he has a little bit of American jazz. Ravel and jazz musicians, there is this mutual sort of love and respect between them. And finally, there's the Spanish flavor, because Ravel's first language was Spanish, not French. He was Basque. His mother was, at least. And that is an interesting point. Think of Bolero as maybe his most famous piece. Not a piece he loved, actually, very much. He called it sort of an experiment, but Bolero has a Spanish theme. Many other Ravel pieces do. So, finally, this is an arrangement. The original version is for a voice. Violinists play this a lot as well. Flute, it's done on the flute. But the piano version is by a guy named Daniel Héricourt. I think if I did this last time, I told you this story, but it's worth telling again. Daniel Héricourt was this French pianist and composer, knew Debussy and Ravel. Now that's about as much as I knew about him when I first played this piece in Greensboro. Big mistake, I didn't read more about him. Because a lady came up to me and said, Robert, you're not going to believe this, but Daniel Héricourt was my neighbor right here in Greensboro. I said, no way, this is the same? She said, yeah. So I looked him up. After living in Paris, he was born there, he knew everybody at that time. He ended up at UNC Greensboro teaching and retired there and lived a very long, productive life. So the moral of the story is, to me at least, I'm telling myself this, always look up who you're going to play and speak about, because you never know who was literally neighbors with him. So, all right, here's the piece. very sophisticated sound, and I struggled to get his style. I was playing a lot of his music in college, a big piece. And I had this dream that I was telling I'm from New Jersey originally. And so in my dream, I was driving by one of New Jersey's famous landmarks, a shopping mall. And it was late at night, and all the lights were on, and the chandeliers were on, but there were no people inside. And I heard Ravel's music, and I woke up, and I realized that's how I picture Ravel, very pristine and kind of glittery. You know, that's like that piece. It has that feel to it. I don't think Ravel was having malls in New Jersey in mind when he wrote his music, but whatever association works for you. That's why I tell people, they say, you know, yeah, I don't know if I get this piece. Well, I would say listen again and try to find what it, you know, resonates with in you, your experience. And so my experience was being from New Jersey. It's New Jersey. So, anyways, I'm going to play a piece now called La Cinquantaine, which means the 50th anniversary. It's from a suite called The Golden Wedding by another French composer, Jean-Gabriel Marie. I haven't found much information about him, but I just know he was a 19th century romantic French composer. This is his most famous piece, probably. The Woody Herman Big Band did a version of this in the 40s. Very different, of course, from what I'm going to do. And I would say this, it's, you know, a 50th anniversary. There's a wonderful mixture of sadness or nostalgia, but also joy in this piece. It sounds cliche, but it's really both of those things mixed together. Music can do that sometimes, I think, can have those opposites. Notice the contrast between this and the Ravel, because this one is much more straightforward, you could say. It has sort of a melody that's easy to remember. And maybe that's why Ravel was so controversial when he came about. So here it is. La Cinquantaine by Gabriel Marie. short pieces there, a lot of them are sort of mellow. I have some not mellow things coming up. So if you like more fire and brimstone, well, that's coming. So let's see. Now I'm going to play a short piece by Fritz Kreisler. And this is an early piece of his called the Caprice Viennois, Viennese Caprice. Again, all of these are violin pieces originally. This is a version for piano. And Fritz Kreisler is one of my favorite composers, violinists, recorded violinists, and human beings in music history. He was everything, complete package. And Kreisler embodies Vienna, I think, more than anyone. Maybe Johann Strauss Jr. and Kreisler, that's Vienna in a nutshell, really. And the really sick thing is that, well, Vienna, the culture of Vienna is, and the history of Vienna, it has this incredible culture on the one hand, but also this descent into madness following the First World War. Somebody said, I heard someone say it this way, Vienna with all its waltzes was saturated in waltzes, right? It waltzed right off a cliff. Yeah. And when the Nazis came to power in the 30s, or even before, Fritz Kreisler and his family, they were Jewish, they left, luckily, and came to America. Had quite a good life here, but it's just a really sick irony that a man who's so embodies Viennese culture in his music was so rejected ultimately by that culture. It just makes me really upset to think about. But anyway, yeah, Kreisler in America, he got to know Rachmaninoff. I may have told you in the past some stories. They played pranks on each other, you know. So he had a good time. Kreisler, you look at photos of him, video footage of him, he's always smiling. And you hear it, if you go to YouTube and listen to Kreisler's violin playing, it'll make your day. Because the warmth of his personality, it's so evident in his violin playing. Yeah, this piece, I don't want to say it's a waltz, but it's kind of waltzy. It's his ode to Vienna. That's what I read about it. And finally, there's this German word which summarizes Kreisler, I've heard from others. It's called Gemütlichkeit, which means, you know the word, it's a coziness. Or, yeah, somebody described it like you're sitting by the fireplace having hot chocolate, it's snowing outside. That's Gemütlichkeit. But it has to be in Vienna, of course. So here is the Kreisler Caprice Viennois. I like the end. It's like, just tossed off. Here's a little, maybe a slightly heavier piece. I'm going to do the first movement of César Franck's violin sonata. People call it the Franck Sonata, which I try not to because it sounds too much like Frank Sinatra, you know. So very, very different. And this is arranged by Alfred Cortot for piano solo. Here's a good way to think of this piece, that Marcel Proust, in Swann's Way, the first novel of his big set, he mentions there's a violin sonata in that novel that figures prominently in the plot. And many people say that that's probably inspired by the Franck. Probably is. Like Proust's writing, which is a series of long sort of flashbacks, you could say, those memories, associations, it doesn't really have a regular plot and development. It's the same case with Franck, I think, this piece too. It sort of just swirls around in this stream of consciousness-like thing. So anyway, here's the first movement of Franck's violin sonata, but for solo piano. That's just the first movement. I'm still working on the rest. It's difficult. It's tricky stuff. So here is the. Is it okay? When does dinner officially start? I just want to know. Is it 5:30? Okay, so if I go a little past 5, it's not a crime, maybe, because the real crime would be to make anybody a second late to dinner. That's, you know, music is fine, but food is really quite much more important. So,
We'll take the music.
well, I'll take the food, thank you. So here's another famous violin piece. This is the Meditation from Thais by Massenet. Piano version, of course. It's from the opera Thais, which is takes place in ancient Roman times in Egypt, Alexandria, Egypt. Thais worships the Greco-Roman gods and goddesses. And there's this young man who's a monk, early Christian monk, and he has the job to convert her, but in the process falls in love with her, because that's what happens in operas. If that didn't happen, there'd be no opera. So here is the Meditation from Thais, Massenet. All right, now for something very, whatever this is. This is Paganini's 24th Caprice. It's originally for solo violin, and I'm playing Franz Liszt's arrangement of it. I may have done it I probably did play this before. Paganini lived kind of at a similar time to Beethoven, straddling the 18th and early 19th centuries. And like Beethoven, he was kind of not really, a person of the Enlightenment, you could say, of that age of reason. Stood out. And for that reason, the Romantics idolized both Paganini and Beethoven. Actually, I've read a funny story about Rossini, a fantastic composer. Rossini said that he cried only a couple times in his life. Once when he heard Paganini play, and the other time when a stuffed turkey on a canoe fell off into the water. So I love Rossini because Rossini he was the rare composer who really didn't have a life of darkness and tragedy. He was just a very happy, positive, he cooked. Anyway, but I'll talk, he was a great cook, wrote cookbooks actually. So anyway, back to Paganini. Paganini was also Italian. Paganini was very controversial, though, at the time. There were people who thought he was possessed because of the way he played, even the way he looked. And he probably had Marfan's syndrome, which contributed to sort of elongated facial features, and et cetera. But that's what we know now, but at that time, people wouldn't think about that, unfortunately. Another interesting thing about Paganini was he not only played violin very well, he played guitar and wrote a lot of guitar pieces. I think even the solo violin caprices are also meant they could be played on the guitar as well. So anyway, Franz Liszt heard Paganini perform, and he was just blown away. But Liszt was actually at a rather low point in his life when he heard Paganini, and you could say the rest was history because Liszt locked himself up in a room to practice incessantly. And it was in that time that he took Paganini's violin works and reshaped them for the piano. He wanted to translate that fire and virtuosity from Paganini's violin playing into the piano. So, to make matters more confusing, Liszt revised these pieces. He wrote 6 of them. I think over the years I've played each one. Remember I played one that was the one that reminded me of the cats, There's that, there's the hunt, So over the years I've worked through these pieces, done my best to do that. And this is the last of Liszt's 6 Paganini arrangements. So Liszt, as I said, he revised these pieces several times. And then I'm playing a version by another composer, Ferruccio Busoni. I feel like I speak Italian when I say that. Ferruccio Busoni, an early 20th century composer, he added some alterations and things to it. That's the version I'm doing. So it's Busoni's version of Liszt's version of Paganini. It's kind of confusing, but here it is. Famous theme and variations. It's It's famous, but let's see what Liszt and Busoni do with it. So. I'll do a little gospel. Yeah, the funny thing is, pieces like that. I love playing actually, in a way, playing the soft stuff is harder because you don't have anywhere to hide. But at any rate, it's good to have both. You need both. Variety is the spice of life. So some Southern gospel I'm going to play in the style of Mahalia Jackson, how she would sing it. I mean, I can't do exactly what she does, but this is he's got the whole world in his hands, famous spiritual. Quick story about Mahalia Jackson. I just love her so much. What a great singer, great human, part of the civil rights movement, instrumental part of that movement. But I played something in her style. I mentioned the name Mahalia Jackson somewhere recently, and somebody laughed, and I was pretty upset. But I got to the car, and it hit me why they laughed, because they probably misheard me and thought I had said Michael Jackson. So, very different, okay? So here, yeah. This is old-time gospel music, so. Another one. This is something I've just put together. This is another thing Mahalia Jackson sang. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. You know, did he? Did that? Okay, well, let's see what I can do with this. This is Harriet asked. Another upbeat. I figured I was going to do some more upbeat stuff at the end because the first part was pretty quiet, so contrast. All right, another very, barnstorm. My hands are getting a little. Okay, this is called there is a fountain. It's actually an old hymn from England in the 1700s. But they would sing it like, you might know the melody. Well, I ain't gonna play like that, okay? So, this, of course, it came to America, and all of the influence of Appalachian music, African American spirituals, etc. I played this somewhere, and someone said, "Oh, you must have grown. I can hear your Pentecostal country upbringing." I said, well, again, I'm from New Jersey. But you pick it up. Music is human. It's all universal. Okay, so anyway, here it is. Last one, I promise. I've been talking too much. I'm sorry. So, thank you so much, and I will see you. I'd love to come back. Actually, if you want to stay in touch, I'll leave out, I have a guest book. If you put your email, I'll send you, not spam you, but send you some YouTubes and such. But love to stay in touch, and I always love to see you. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.